Harry and Meghan stepped out separately in New York, going their separate ways.
What began as a private fashion trip, according to her team, quickly revealed itself to be something much more deliberate.
It's over.
A comeback tour,
Nancy Sidley's verdict.
a bid to reclaim her place
After another disastrous weekend,
in the couture world that once courted her.
proving that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are on edge, with even their enemies at the Daily Mail reporting on new strains in the marriage.
But inside Dior's marble offices, the reception had already been decided. Sources close to the house told Le Monde that internal memos had circulated weeks in advance. No unscheduled visits, no fittings, and no exceptions. In other words, the Duchess of Sussex was not welcome. She arrived anyway, confident, smiling, and insisting she had an appointment for a couture session. But when her name wasn't on the list, staff simply referred to protocol. No scene, no raised voices, just the quiet efficiency that defines Parisian luxury. One insider described the atmosphere as frosted calm. For Meghan, the politeness only deepened the sting. What she thought was a formality became a full stop, and for a woman who had spent months positioning herself as Dior's next global muse, that door closing wasn't just logistical, it was symbolic.
Harry went one way, Meghan went the other way. I mean, it was not a huge surprise, given the barely simmering tension being able to keep under the surface at the Humanitarian of the Year Awards. I still laugh at that on Friday night. So here was Meghan.
Within hours, whispers began to spread through the narrow corridors of Paris fashion circles. Word traveled not through tabloids, but through stylists, assistants, and PR managers. The invisible network that decides who belongs. Reports suggest Dior executives had already voted internally to blacklist her months earlier, citing reputational risk and brand misalignment. The polite rejection that morning wasn't an accident. It was enforcement. By midday, Meghan's team scrambled to reframe the story, leaking to friendly outlets that she'd never requested an official meeting, but those inside Dior claim otherwise. "We dress legends," one executive allegedly said. "We don't create them from controversy." That quote, quiet, cutting, and devastatingly French, became the unofficial headline whispered at every after-party that week. And yet, Dior's silence spoke louder than any denial. When the house issued its short off-record note, Dior has no current or planned partnership with the Duchess of Sussex, the message was unmistakable. No theatrics, no argument, just distance. For a brand built on timeless grace, even association can be a risk. And to them, Meghan had become just that, a risk wrapped in glamour. The fallout didn't end at Dior's doors. Inside the wider LVMH network, which includes Givenchy, Fendi, and Louis Vuitton, her name quietly landed on what insiders call the restricted contact list. These lists rarely see daylight, but they carry real power. They determine who gets invited, who gets dressed, and who disappears from the conversation.
Yet, as Royally Sage pointed out, he never leaves. He never leaves because he wants her to attack his family.
By the time Meghan posted her smiling selfies from Paris, the industry had already moved on. For Meghan Markle, it was supposed to be a renaissance. Instead, Paris had written her obituary. Not in headlines, but in silence. By the time Meghan's car pulled up to Balenciaga's show, the silence from Dior had already evolved into whispers. Not just about her rejection, but about what came next. Paris had gone quiet in the way only high society can. Polite smiles in public, brutal honesty behind closed doors. What began as rumor soon became an undercurrent. "She was turned away," one stylist murmured, politely but definitely. Those 6 words rippled through every hallway, cafe, and PR office within hours. Then a curious thing happened. Online, the story started to shift. Suddenly, a wave of posts appeared on social media celebrating Meghan's enduring relationship with Dior. Influencers with strikingly similar captions, "Her Dior era isn't over, it's evolving," began appearing in synchronized bursts. To the untrained eye, it looked like organic support. But insiders noticed the identical phrasing, the recycled hashtags, the timing. Dior's internal communications team did too. Reports suggest they quietly launched an internal audit that traced the campaign back to agencies connected to Meghan's own PR network. To Dior, it looked less like coincidence, more like damage control disguised as devotion. Within hours, the house issued a subtle correction through European editors. Dior has no current or planned partnership with the Duchess of Sussex. It was the corporate equivalent of closing a door and turning off the lights. That one-line statement marked a shift in tone, from private rejection to public disassociation.
Even though looks could kill, as the royal grift also beautifully pointed out.
Industry watchers say it was the moment Paris decided where she stood. The fashion capital doesn't announce blacklists. It enforces them through absence. One editor described it best: "You don't get banned in Paris, you get forgotten." And as Dior's distance solidified, others followed. Givenchy, the label that once dressed her for royal events, quietly declined new pitches. Chanel stopped returning calls. Even stylists who once championed her received quiet guidance to avoid association. Still, Meghan wasn't ready to retreat. Her next move was bold, or desperate, depending on who you ask. She reappeared at Balenciaga's Paris Fashion Week show, front row, flawless, every camera clicking. The move was calculated to reclaim her narrative. If Dior had turned her away, she would simply walk into another empire. But those inside the venue noticed what the cameras didn't: a shift in atmosphere. "You could feel the air freeze," one attendee whispered to Grazia France. Designers offered polite nods, but no warmth. Editors kept their distance. The applause was dutiful, not delighted. Behind the scenes, that discomfort became conversation. Assistants traded notes, PRs compared reactions, and by the end of the night, the talk wasn't about her outfit. It was about her energy. In a world where presence is currency, Meghan's had suddenly depreciated. The silence she'd met at Dior had followed her to Balenciaga, louder, colder, and harder to ignore. Days after that icy Balenciaga debut, the whispers turned into something sharper. Screenshots began circulating in private WhatsApp groups among stylists and editors, alleged internal communications from Dior executives that seemed to confirm what many had already suspected. According to Le Figaro, the messages showed ongoing outreach from Meghan's team dating back months, multiple proposals, carefully crafted partnership decks, and one line that reportedly crossed a boundary.
And look, there were so many issues that even came through after the event on Friday night, when, remember, both of these two would have been desperate to be on their best behavior and try to show a united front. Watch.
Meghan's comparison of herself to Princess Diana's elegance, reimagined for a new generation. That was the sentence, insiders say, that sealed her fate. Within Dior's leadership circle, the idea wasn't just rejected, it was viewed as dangerous. Reports suggest that executives feared public backlash if they appeared to exploit Diana's image, especially from a figure who had already been accused of doing so for personal branding. "It wasn't about fashion anymore," said one industry commentator. "It was about symbolism, and that kind of symbolism can burn reputations." According to sources familiar with the discussion, Dior's board quietly voted to distance the brand entirely. They didn't just decline, they blacklisted. Inside the LVMH network, the decision spread like perfume, subtle but pervasive. Each house has what insiders call a sensitivity index, a matrix that weighs risk, influence, and sentiment before approving collaborations. By midweek, Meghan's name had been downgraded across multiple subsidiaries, not banned, but deprioritized, a corporate euphemism for invisible. A stylist affiliated with Louis Vuitton told Women's Wear Daily, "Once a name lands on that list, it doesn't come off. It just stops being spoken." Meanwhile, Meghan's PR team scrambled again, flooding fashion media with positive spin. Articles appeared overnight praising her Paris confidence and modern take on classic couture, but reporters noticed something odd. The phrasing, again, was identical across different outlets. Word is that even publicists inside Balenciaga grew nervous about being tied to her. "No one wants to be collateral in a reputation war," one said anonymously. Fans online began picking up fragments of the story, posting theories that Dior's snub was personal revenge for previous royal tensions. Hashtags like Chalker Diorgate and Paris Freeze began trending on X, pulling in millions of views. Some defended Meghan, accusing fashion elites of gatekeeping modern royalty. Others mocked her attempt to force elegance. The discourse turned chaotic, exactly the kind of noise luxury brands avoid at all costs. By the weekend, insiders say even friendly stylists were warned off working with her. One PR manager summed it up bluntly: "She's not blacklisted because of scandal. She's blacklisted because of risk. No brand wants to be the next headline." It was no longer about one rejection, it was about contagion. How a single miscalculation in tone had rippled through Paris, turning a private rejection into a full-blown industry freeze. By midweek, what had started as whispers about Dior turned into something darker. A conversation about respect, legacy, and limits. Meghan's Balenciaga appearance was supposed to close the chapter. Instead, it ignited a new one. According to one attendee quoted in Elle France, everyone wanted to move on until she made it impossible. That moment came when cameras caught her team filming near the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, the same site where Princess Diana's life ended. Her publicists claimed it was just a scenic drive for a Paris montage. But in a city that still treats that tunnel like sacred ground, no explanation was enough. To many Parisians, it was a line crossed, not by intent, but by insensitivity. Reports suggest that even neutral editors turned uneasy. It felt symbolic, said a stylist who once worked with Dior, like she was reclaiming Diana's story for content. Online, the backlash was immediate. French commentators on X called it macabre marketing. British tabloids picked up the footage within hours, running headlines like, "The Tunnel of Taste Lost." Even her own fan accounts began to go quiet, unsure how to defend the choice. Behind the scenes, it was worse. Industry insiders told Fashion Network that the incident reignited old doubts, that Meghan's branding leaned too heavily on the Diana comparison, something that made both audiences and luxury houses uncomfortable. One PR executive put it bluntly, "Diana didn't chase symbolism, she embodied it. Meghan tries to direct it, and that's the problem." Meanwhile, the gossip inside Balenciaga's backstage grew. Stylists whispered about the energy she brought, the same word that had circulated after Dior's rejection. One assistant described the atmosphere as heavy, not because of her presence, but because of what it represented. The disconnect between how she saw herself and how the industry now saw her. Paris forgives scandal, insiders said, but not desperation. What sealed the narrative wasn't the footage, it was the silence that followed. After the tunnel controversy, no brand came to her defense. No designer issued clarification. Even Balenciaga distanced itself subtly, confirming through Vogue Italia that Meghan's outfit had not been provided or approved by the brand. The message was unmistakable. She wasn't a guest of honor, she was a guest of circumstance. That silence hit harder than any statement. In fashion, absence is exile. Meghan had walked into Paris expecting a stage. What she found instead was a spotlight with no audience. By the time the Fashion Week tents started coming down, her narrative had collapsed. Not through outrage, but through quiet disinterest, the most elegant punishment of all. When the lights dimmed on Paris Fashion Week, there was no grand finale for Meghan Markle. No after-party invites, no congratulatory posts from designers, no whisper of, "See you next season." What remained was a quiet understanding across the couture capital. The Duchess had crossed an invisible line. Paris didn't cancel her, it simply looked away. Insiders told Le Figaro that by the week's end, Meghan's name had been quietly removed from several brands' media contact lists. Not a single luxury label extended fresh invitations for upcoming campaigns. "That's how the industry speaks," one communications director said. "No press release, no statement, just silence." And in that silence, reputations are rewritten. Stylists who once courted her began declining requests. Even freelance photographers stopped angling for her best light. One editor summed it up coldly. "She didn't fall from grace. She ran out of rooms that wanted her. Her return flight captured it perfectly. Cameras flashing at the terminal, her smile unwavering, yet the warmth behind those flashes was gone." Paris had made its decision. The Dior rejection had not been a scandal, it was a sentence, and when that verdict rippled through LVMH and beyond, it drew a boundary around Meghan's entire brand. Not too controversial, not too political, simply too unpredictable. For Meghan, it was the bitter irony of control. Every step had been orchestrated. The outfits, the poses, the narrative. But control doesn't create legacy. It only mimics it. In chasing the aura of Princess Diana, she had overlooked the element that made Diana untouchable: authenticity. As one veteran journalist put it, Diana was vulnerable in public. Meghan performs vulnerability. That difference, subtle but fatal, became the quiet chorus that followed her out of Paris. The fashion world's verdict wasn't about moral judgment, it was about emotional truth. You can buy elegance, but you can't manufacture grace. Paris, more than any other city, knows the difference, and when Meghan tried to merge image with inheritance, it didn't just reject her. It reflected her back. What she saw wasn't adoration, but distance. Her story in Paris ended without applause, but with a lesson, one that outlasts hashtags and headlines. In couture, admiration isn't something you demand, it's something you earn, stitch by stitch, truth by truth. Because in the end, the world of fashion doesn't exile loudly. It just stops looking up when you enter the room.